The space station hung like a glittering jewel in the void, spinning silently above the pale blue curve of the planet below. Its metal corridors gleamed under bright artificial lights, and the hum of machinery filled the air, a constant reminder of the station's relentless activity. Humans lived here in luxury, surrounded by the best technology money could buy. But in the lower levels where the maintenance crews worked, the hum was louder, the air thinner, and the lights harsher. It was a world apart, a place where no one cared about wealth or titles, and where survival depended on skill and careful attention to detail. Among the workers, one figure moved quietly, a janitor with a calm presence. He was not tall, and his clothes were plain and practical, worn from years of scrubbing floors, maintaining systems, and keeping the station running. His name was Elias, and most people barely noticed him. That was exactly how he wanted it. He knew every corner of the station, every maintenance hatch, and every minor flaw that could grow into disaster. While others looked up at the glittering upper decks, he understood the heartbeat of the station, the quiet power of knowledge and patience. Elias had no desire for recognition. His pride was private, a satisfaction in knowing that the station would not fail under his watch. Yet today, even he could not ignore the chaos on the upper decks. The source of the trouble was a young woman who could have been mistaken for royalty even among billionaires. She walked with the certainty that the world existed for her amusement, her presence commanding attention whether she wanted it or not. Her name was Seraphine, the rebellious daughter of one of the richest humans in the galaxy. She was notorious across the station for her reckless antics, her sharp tongue, and her complete disregard for authority. Today, Seraphine had outdone herself. She had commandeered a hover platform from the elite leisure deck and decided to race through the corridors at impossible speed. Security officers had tried to stop her, but she laughed in their faces, narrowly dodging sensors and nearly colliding with a transport shuttle. Servants and attendants scurried aside as her laughter echoed down the wide halls, a sharp, high-pitched sound that grated against even the most patient ears. The station's upper decks were in turmoil. Officers shouted orders, demanding the reckless heiress be restrained. The security AI blared warnings through the public address system, but Seraphine ignored them, flipping switches, pressing panels, and narrowly avoiding disaster at every turn. The wealthy passengers inside transparent observation pods gasped and murmured complaints. "Someone should put her in her place," one muttered, and others nodded, but no one dared act. She was untouchable. Elias, working several levels below in the maintenance tunnels, watched the alerts flash across the monitoring screens he had installed for routine checks. He shook his head, not in fear, but in quiet amusement. He had seen chaos before, but this was different. Seraphine's recklessness was not born from ignorance. It was born from arrogance, from a belief that her wealth made her superior to every worker, officer, and technician on the station. That belief, he thought, was dangerous. He cleaned the floors mechanically, wiping away dust and small oil stains, but his mind was alert. He began tracing the projected path of the hover platform, noting the weak points in the station's structure that could pose real danger if she continued. He didn't intend to harm her. Elias did not operate that way, but he also believed in consequences. Knowledge was a form of power, and he intended to remind Seraphine that no amount of money could shield her from it. As the young woman zipped through the corridors, she noticed the floor panels vibrating under her platform. She leaned forward, laughing, convinced that the minor tremors were just the station settling. She had never considered that someone might be watching, studying her movements, waiting for the right moment. Elias followed silently, his clean, practical shoes making no sound on the metal catwalks above her route. He did not intervene directly, not yet. He was patient, and patience was his weapon. By the time Seraphine reached the leisure dome, a wide space with glass walls revealing the planet below, she was exhilarated and careless. She performed a sharp turn over the observation pods, causing a few of the onlookers to duck for cover. One officer shouted, "Stop this at once!" But the young heiress only smiled and waved, as if mocking the very concept of rules. Elias had calculated her path, predicting every reckless maneuver. As she sped across the dome, he quietly adjusted a nearby maintenance hatch, rerouting minor energy conduits to redirect some of the platform's hover thrust systems. Nothing would injure her, but it would be noticeable, a subtle reminder that even the station's systems did not bend to her will. The platform jerked unexpectedly, causing Seraphine to nearly lose control. She pressed buttons frantically, her eyes wide, and then froze when she realized the adjustment was beyond her understanding. Around her, the lights flickered as minor alarms went off, drawing the attention of nearby officers and engineers. She tried to correct the movement, but the platform resisted, gently nudging her into a safer, slower trajectory. For the first time in many months, Seraphine felt a flash of uncertainty. She looked around, expecting to see someone controlling this intervention, a security officer perhaps, or a technician, but no one appeared. The dome was empty, save for the blinking lights of monitoring equipment. Frustrated, she slammed the controls, her usual confidence faltering. Below her in the maintenance tunnels, Elias paused his work. He watched her struggle, his expression calm, almost unreadable. He was not trying to punish her. He was giving her a lesson in humility, in awareness, in the simple truth that the world did not revolve around her whims. He had seen too many people fall into traps of arrogance, too many stations suffer because someone believed rules were optional. Today, he would remind her otherwise. Seraphine eventually managed to stabilize the platform, but the exhilaration she had felt moments before had changed into irritation and confusion. She stomped on the platform controls, glaring at the blinking panels, her pride wounded. For a moment, she could not understand what had happened. How could a simple system adjust without her input? Who would dare intervene without permission? Her frustration turned into indignation, and she vowed to find the culprit. Meanwhile, officers and engineers began to investigate the disturbances, but all traced paths ended in empty corridors. The station's upper decks buzzed with speculation, and whispers of a hidden saboteur circulated among the staff. No one suspected a janitor. Elias, after all, was invisible to most, blending into the background, unnoticed even when standing in plain sight. As the crowd of elite passengers dispersed, muttering about the heiress's behavior, Elias returned to his work. He wiped a smudge from a control panel, checked a pressure gauge, and adjusted a small maintenance valve. Everything continued smoothly as it always had. He did not gloat, did not celebrate, and did not draw attention to himself. He simply knew that the lesson had begun and that one day it would reach its conclusion. Seraphine, however, did not give up. She stormed down to the lower corridors, demanding answers from the staff. She questioned technicians, officers, and attendants, but each denied involvement. She was clever and resourceful, and her pride would not allow her to let this mystery go. She demanded that the security AI analyze all movements, track every maintenance worker, and find the culprit. The AI complied, scanning every log, every camera, every record. Elias watched this unfold from the shadows. He did not need the AI, he already knew the outcome. The young heiress would chase a phantom, follow false leads, and yet never suspect him. Her arrogance blinded her, and that blindness was part of the lesson. Humility, after all, could not be taught with words alone. It required experience, failure, and recognition of someone smarter, faster, or more aware. By the end of the day, the upper decks had returned to their usual state of polished luxury and strict hierarchy. Seraphine retreated to her quarters, plotting her next move. She would not rest until she had discovered who had interfered with her plans, and she would not tolerate the idea that someone beneath her station could challenge her. Down below, Elias continued his rounds, fixing minor leaks, checking energy conduits, and wiping the floors. To the casual observer, he was just another janitor, another worker performing ordinary tasks. But in truth, he had set in motion a chain of events that would change the station and its inhabitants in ways no one yet realized. His tools were knowledge, patience, and observation. His goal was not revenge, but understanding, teaching, and proving a simple truth. No one, no matter how powerful or arrogant, could stand above those who truly knew their world. And so the first day of the battle of wits came to a close. The rebellious heiress, furious yet intrigued, had felt for the first time that the station was not hers to command. The humble janitor, quiet and unseen, had begun his silent campaign. Neither knew what the future held, but one thing was certain. The rules had shifted, and a new force had quietly emerged on the station. An ordinary human whose skill, patience, and intelligence would not be ignored. Seraphine paced her luxurious quarters, the polished floor reflecting the flashing lights from the city below. She had spent hours replaying every moment of the hover platform incident in her mind, searching for a mistake she might have made. But the truth was simple. She had done nothing wrong. The platform had simply misbehaved, and yet she could not shake the feeling that someone had interfered. Someone had dared to challenge her. She refused to believe that anyone in the lower levels could possess such skill. That thought alone stung her pride. How could a mere janitor, or any ordinary worker, possibly manipulate the advanced systems of the station without detection? Her social circle, composed entirely of the wealthy and powerful, would have scoffed at the idea. No one from her world could conceive of a person so unassuming being capable of cleverness. Meanwhile, several levels below, Elias went about his routine with deliberate calm. He checked pressure valves, wiped fingerprints from polished metal surfaces, and made minor adjustments to energy conduits. To any observer, he was just another maintenance worker, invisible and unremarkable. But he watched the upper decks closely, monitoring the young heiress from afar. He did not take satisfaction in her frustration. He was patient, methodical, and deliberate. Elias understood the power of subtlety. A direct confrontation would only escalate the situation, inflaming Seraphine's arrogance. Instead, he would teach her lessons using logic, patience, and small interventions. He began planning his next move carefully, analyzing her patterns, predicting her behavior, and preparing to guide her toward humility without harming her. The next morning, the station's corridors were filled with whispers. Servants and attendants muttered about the heiress's latest humiliation, and officers exchanged uneasy glances. No one had seen who had interfered with the hover platform, and the AI's logs were inconclusive. For a moment, it seemed as though the station itself had acted. Seraphine, however, refused to leave the mystery unsolved. She had summoned her personal assistants and demanded a complete audit of every maintenance worker on the station. Each worker's schedule, location, and recent activity were scrutinized. The technicians scanned every energy conduit, sensor, and security camera feed. Every piece of data was cross-referenced, every anomaly investigated. Yet, Elias remained invisible. That afternoon, Seraphine decided to take matters into her own hands. She donned a lightweight protective suit and descended into the lower maintenance levels, confident that she could catch the culprit herself. Her movements were swift, precise, and deliberate, and she carried herself with the arrogance of someone accustomed to absolute authority. Elias noticed her descent from his monitoring station but did not move. He had anticipated this. He had predicted that she would become restless, her curiosity and pride driving her into the areas he knew best. He smiled faintly to himself. This was the moment when subtle lessons could be most effective. Seraphine entered the narrow tunnels, her boots echoing against the metal floor. She glanced at every panel, every maintenance hatch, and every worker she passed. Each one looked ordinary, each one ignored her, and yet her instincts told her she was being observed. She stopped to inspect a junction box, pretending to examine it while secretly searching for evidence of sabotage. Elias moved silently along a parallel passage, adjusting valves and rerouting minor conduits as he went. He created small, harmless anomalies that would draw Seraphine's attention. Lights flickered here, a panel beeped there. Each disruption was carefully calculated, designed to frustrate her just enough to slow her pace and make her more aware of her surroundings. As she followed the anomalies, Seraphine's confidence began to waver. The station, which she had always considered a playground, now felt unpredictable. Her previous arrogance gave way to a mixture of curiosity and irritation. She realized that she could not control everything, and the idea unsettled her. Hours passed as she moved through the labyrinthine corridors, chasing the phantom disturbances. She questioned workers, but they all denied involvement. Their responses were polite but indifferent, as if her presence did not concern them. This lack of deference was new to her, and it irritated her further. Finally, she reached a section of the station where the tunnels converged. A minor energy fluctuation caused the lights to flicker, and a small maintenance drone began moving erratically. Seraphine lunged forward, trying to stabilize it, but the drone eluded her grasp. She could not understand how something so simple had become so complicated. Elias observed from a distance, noting her struggle with careful attention. He did not intervene directly, he allowed her to experience the challenge. His strategy was simple: teach through experience rather than instruction. By guiding her subtly, he could show her that intelligence, observation, and patience were more valuable than wealth or authority. Seraphine, frustrated and exhausted, finally slumped against the wall. Her pride bristled at the realization that she was not in control. She had been challenged by something she could not see, something she could not predict. For the first time, she felt a pang of humility. It was brief, fleeting, but it unsettled her profoundly. Elias took this moment to act subtly. A small panel opened near her feet, releasing a harmless burst of steam that created a visual pattern on the floor. It was not dangerous, but it was noticeable, and it drew her attention immediately. She bent down, examining the pattern with curiosity and frustration. She had seen nothing like it in the station's manuals, nothing in the AI's logs. Someone had thought ahead, anticipated her movements, and used the station itself as a tool to challenge her. Her curiosity flared, mingled with her pride. She would not be bested by someone unseen. She would find the source, and she would reclaim her sense of control. She began tracing the conduit lines, following the pattern of anomalies, her mind working faster than it had in years. She was not used to being challenged in this way, and the novelty excited her despite her irritation. Meanwhile, Elias continued his rounds, ensuring that each anomaly led naturally to the next. He watched her track the patterns, noticing how she reacted to each subtle clue. Her mind was sharp, her instincts strong, and her curiosity was relentless. These were qualities he respected, and he knew that the lessons he was teaching would only be effective if she recognized her own limitations and learned to value skill and observation over arrogance. By evening, Seraphine had traced several anomalies to a central junction of maintenance conduits. She paused, realizing that she was close to discovering the source. Her heart raced with excitement and frustration. She had never felt challenged like this, and the sensation was both thrilling and humbling. She knew that whoever had orchestrated this was clever, disciplined, and patient, qualities she had never considered necessary in a person of her own world. Elias, sensing that the lesson was taking hold, allowed her to proceed a little further. He created one final anomaly, a simple but unmistakable signal that would lead her to the understanding she needed without revealing him directly. Seraphine followed it carefully, her mind working faster than ever, analyzing patterns, predicting outcomes, and testing hypotheses. Finally, she reached a junction where the anomalies seemed to originate. She examined the panels, the conduits, and the small maintenance drones buzzing nearby. Her eyes narrowed, her mind racing. She understood that this was no ordinary system failure. Someone had anticipated her every move, designed challenges to test her patience and observation, and ensured that she would confront her own limitations. Frustration and admiration warred within her. She could not see the orchestrator, yet she could feel their presence in every detail, every adjustment, every subtle cue. For the first time, she realized that wealth and privilege could not substitute for intelligence, patience, and experience. The realization shook her deeply. Elias watched silently from his vantage point, noting her reactions. He did not reveal himself. The lesson was more powerful if she discovered it on her own, if she recognized the intelligence and skill that had orchestrated these challenges without being told. Humility, he knew, could not be taught by words alone. It required experience, recognition, and reflection. As the station lights dimmed for the night cycle, Seraphine finally retreated to her quarters, exhausted and thoughtful. She replayed every moment in her mind, analyzing each anomaly, each subtle challenge. She realized that someone had outsmarted her, guided her, and taught her a lesson in patience and observation. She did not yet know who, but she understood that this person possessed skills she had never encountered before. Elias, cleaning the corridors far below, allowed himself a quiet smile. The first phase of the lesson had succeeded. The heiress had been challenged, her arrogance tempered by uncertainty, her mind engaged in ways it had not been for years. Tomorrow, he would continue the process, guiding her toward humility and understanding, without ever revealing himself directly. In the upper decks, Seraphine stared out at the city below, her mind restless. She realized that she had been too confident, too reckless, and too certain of her control. She also realized that she had never encountered a challenge like this, an invisible opponent who could anticipate her every move. For the first time, she felt a mixture of respect and unease. Elias continued his work, quietly maintaining the station, unseen, unnoticed, yet profoundly present. He had begun to teach a powerful lesson, that skill, intelligence, and patience could surpass wealth, arrogance, and entitlement. The station, he knew, was a teacher as well as a home, and those who respected it, observed it, and understood it could wield its power in ways no fortune could match. And so, the game between the rebellious heiress and the humble janitor began in earnest. She would seek, he would guide, and slowly, step by step, she would learn that the world was not hers to command, and that true power came not from status, but from understanding, observation, and the quiet strength of those who worked unseen. The next morning, the station woke to a quiet tension that was unusual for the bustling decks. Workers went about their routines with an extra watchfulness, and the upper decks buzzed with whispered speculation. Seraphine moved through her quarters, her mind still replaying the previous day's events. She could not forget the anomalies, the subtle disruptions, the sense that someone had outsmarted her at every turn. Her pride bristled at the idea, yet she could not deny a strange curiosity creeping in. She called her assistants and demanded detailed reports on the maintenance schedules of every worker on the lower decks. Every technician, engineer, and janitor was accounted for, yet there was no clear answer. Each report concluded the same thing: nothing unusual, no deviations, no errors. Seraphine scowled, flipping through the documents. Someone had outmaneuvered her without leaving a trace. The thought fascinated and frustrated her at the same time. Elias, meanwhile, continued his rounds far below, quietly observing. He adjusted small systems, monitored energy flows, and ensured that the station ran smoothly. To any outsider, he was invisible, just another worker performing ordinary tasks. But he knew Seraphine's movements better than she realized. He had anticipated that she would search for the source of the anomalies, and he had prepared further lessons for her. By midday, Seraphine had grown restless. She could not simply wait for answers. She needed to act. She donned her light protective suit once again and descended into the lower maintenance levels, determined to discover the cause of the mysterious disruptions herself. Her movements were precise and calculated, a sharp contrast to her usual impulsive antics. The station's lower corridors stretched before her, narrow and shadowed, a maze of pipes, conduits, and maintenance hatches. Elias watched from a hidden vantage point. He noted her pattern carefully, predicting her likely path and the areas she would inspect first. He made subtle adjustments, rerouting minor energy flows and triggering harmless system alerts designed to guide her attention. Each anomaly was carefully calculated to challenge her perception, forcing her to slow down, observe, and think critically. Seraphine stopped at the first anomaly, a small panel flickering with unusual lights. She leaned forward, inspecting the circuitry, her brow furrowed. The display did not make sense. No manual, no AI log, no technician could account for it. She tapped a few controls, testing the responses, and found that the panel's behavior shifted depending on how she interacted with it. For the first time, she felt challenged in a way that required more than arrogance to overcome. She moved deeper into the tunnels, following the trail of anomalies. Each step brought new puzzles: a drone moving unpredictably, a control panel that required simultaneous inputs from multiple angles, a pressure gauge that fluctuated subtly, demanding careful observation. She realized that she was tracing a path intentionally left for her, designed by someone with foresight and intelligence. Elias continued to observe silently. He did not reveal himself, nor did he intervene directly. His goal was to guide her, to allow her to experience the lesson firsthand. Each anomaly tested her patience, her observation, and her reasoning. Her reactions were sharp, clever, and determined, and he noted with quiet satisfaction that she was learning, even if she did not realize it yet. Hours passed. Seraphine's initial frustration began to transform into focus. She adjusted her approach, slowing down to observe, analyzing patterns, predicting outcomes. She started noticing small details she had overlooked before: the way a conduit vibrated, the timing of a light flicker, the sequence of drone movements. Her pride still burned, but it was now tempered with curiosity. She understood in some small way that she was facing a worthy challenge. Finally, she reached a junction where multiple anomalies converged. The corridor was lined with energy conduits, maintenance hatches, and blinking panels. Here, she paused, taking in the scene. The complexity of the disruptions indicated a mind at work, a mind that understood the station's inner workings intimately. Her pulse quickened with excitement and apprehension. She was no longer merely searching for the culprit. She was beginning to respect the intelligence behind the design. Elias, observing from the shadows, allowed her to proceed a little further. He had calculated that this junction would be critical. He triggered a final, subtle anomaly, a small burst of harmless steam that moved in a deliberate pattern, forming a trail leading to a terminal she had not noticed before. It was a simple gesture, but it demanded her attention, and she followed it instinctively. The terminal displayed a series of diagnostic logs, energy flow charts, and minor system adjustments. She traced each one carefully, noticing the subtle manipulations, the patterns that aligned perfectly with her earlier disruptions. Someone had planned this meticulously, anticipating her every move and ensuring that each challenge tested her observation and reasoning. For the first time, Seraphine admitted to herself that she had been bested, not by force, not by authority, but by skill and foresight. Her mind raced with thoughts of who could possess such knowledge and patience. No one in her circle, no technician she had ever met, could have orchestrated this. The realization unsettled her. Elias remained hidden, noting her reactions with calm satisfaction. He had not underestimated her. He knew her intelligence and resourcefulness. But he also knew that true lessons required discovery. She needed to understand on her own that observation, patience, and understanding were more powerful than wealth or status. Seraphine continued her investigation, following the patterns, analyzing the data, and testing her hypotheses. She grew more precise in her movements, more deliberate in her decisions, and more attentive to subtle cues. Each success built her confidence, while each minor setback reminded her of her limitations. She began to see the value of careful observation and thoughtful action, qualities she had rarely needed in her life of privilege. By evening, she had traced the anomalies to a central maintenance hub. Here, the patterns converged, the panels synchronized, and the small drones moved in coordinated formations. She examined everything carefully, trying to determine the source of the intelligence that had orchestrated these challenges. She could feel the presence of a mind, guiding her, anticipating her actions, yet she could not see its owner. Her frustration mingled with admiration. She realized that she was facing someone who had skill, patience, and foresight, qualities she had previously considered irrelevant. Her pride struggled against this recognition, but a part of her could not help but respect the intelligence that had guided her so subtly. Elias, watching from a safe distance, allowed her to pause and reflect. The lesson was progressing as planned. She was beginning to understand that true power was not measured in wealth, status, or authority, but in observation, understanding, and the ability to anticipate and adapt. As the night cycle began, Seraphine retreated to her quarters, exhausted and thoughtful. She replayed every detail, every anomaly, every subtle manipulation. She realized that she had been challenged by someone who understood the station better than she did, someone who could guide her without confrontation, and someone whose skill she could not yet match. Elias, finishing his rounds in the quiet corridors, allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The heiress had been challenged and engaged in a way that would plant the seeds of humility and respect. Tomorrow he would continue the lessons, gradually increasing the complexity of the challenges, pushing her to think critically, observe carefully, and recognize the value of skill and patience over arrogance. The station settled into silence, the hum of machinery the only sound. Seraphine, in her quarters, stared out at the city below, her mind restless. She understood that she had been tested, and she felt a mixture of pride and unease. She did not yet know who had orchestrated these challenges, but she sensed that the person was watching, guiding, and shaping her understanding. Elias, moving through the lower tunnels, continued his work with quiet diligence. He cleaned floors, adjusted conduits, and ensured the station's systems functioned perfectly. He remained unseen, unnoticed, yet profoundly present. He had begun a silent campaign to teach the heiress lessons she would never forget, lessons in observation, patience, and the value of skill over status. And so the delicate game continued. The rebellious heiress had been challenged, her arrogance tempered by uncertainty and curiosity. The humble janitor had begun to guide her, unseen, through subtle lessons that would test her mind, challenge her pride, and awaken a new understanding of true strength. Each day, each anomaly, each subtle cue brought them closer to a confrontation neither fully understood, a meeting of skill and intellect that would forever change the station and those who lived upon it. The station spun quietly above the planet, a massive ring of glass and steel reflecting the sun's light. On the upper decks, life carried on as usual, with the wealthy indulging in luxuries and the officers maintaining the delicate balance of order. But below, in the maintenance tunnels, a different rhythm pulsed. Systems hummed, lights flickered, and the janitor moved among them like a shadow, checking valves, conduits, and energy flows with practiced precision. Elias had sensed a subtle shift in the station's readings that morning, and he knew it demanded immediate attention. The alert first came as a small anomaly on one of the monitoring screens. A fragment from the nearby asteroid belt had altered its course unexpectedly, heading straight for the station. Automated defense systems were designed to neutralize minor debris, but this fragment was larger than anticipated and traveling faster than any previous record. Officers quickly convened in the control rooms, and the AI began calculating interception trajectories. Yet, as the initial panic spread, it became clear that the system had an unexpected flaw. The automatic defenses could not adjust fast enough, and human intervention was required. Seraphine, in her quarters, heard the alarms echo through the upper decks. The blinking lights and public announcements drew her attention immediately. Her heart raced, but she did not panic. Instead, she grabbed her protective suit and moved toward the control center, determination written across her face. For once, she knew she could not rely solely on others to fix a problem. This was bigger than pranks or ego, it was a matter of survival. Elias, meanwhile, moved swiftly through the lower corridors, analyzing the anomaly. The fragment's trajectory posed a serious threat. He traced the flow of automated defense commands and discovered several minor errors that could escalate into catastrophic failure if left unchecked. His knowledge of the station's inner systems allowed him to calculate a solution. Minor adjustments to the defense grids combined with rerouting auxiliary power could create a temporary shield long enough to neutralize the fragment. He moved quickly, making precise adjustments to energy conduits, overriding minor system locks, and preparing the station's defenses for manual assistance. To any casual observer, his actions would have seemed like routine maintenance, but in reality, he was coordinating a complex series of tasks that required skill, foresight, and quick thinking. Seraphine arrived at the control center just as officers were attempting to manually intervene. She took her place at a terminal, scanning data feeds, energy outputs, and sensor logs. She understood the threat immediately, but her previous arrogance clashed with the complexity of the situation. The automated defenses were failing, and there were too many variables for her to manage alone. She realized reluctantly that she could not handle this crisis with pride or authority alone. Elias, working in the tunnels below, noticed her presence on the monitoring screens. He could see her movements, the way her fingers flew across the controls, her focus intense yet scattered. He had anticipated that she might attempt to intervene, and he knew that guiding her was essential. He began making subtle adjustments that would allow her to succeed, but only if she paid close attention, observed carefully, and followed patterns she might have otherwise ignored. As the fragment approached, tension filled the station. Officers shouted commands, assistants scurried to adjust systems, and the AI continuously recalculated the trajectory. The upper decks were in a state of controlled panic. Seraphine's hands moved rapidly, coordinating energy flows, stabilizing panels, and adjusting shields. She realized that brute force or authority would not solve the problem. Instead, she had to think critically, observe the patterns, and anticipate outcomes, skills Elias had already been teaching her without her knowing it. Elias monitored each adjustment she made. He observed her hesitation at certain points and the way she corrected minor errors instinctively. His subtle manipulations guided her focus, highlighting patterns and anomalies that would have otherwise gone unnoticed. Through this indirect mentorship, she began to act with precision and clarity, her mind finally adapting to the challenge at hand. Minutes passed like hours. The asteroid fragment drew closer, and the station's automated shields flickered and strained. Seraphine adjusted power conduits, diverted auxiliary energy, and recalculated trajectories based on real-time sensor data. She was exhausted, but she did not stop. Her pride had been replaced, at least temporarily, by focus, determination, and respect for the complexity of the station. Finally, Elias executed the last adjustment from the tunnels below. A minor conduit rerouting stabilized the auxiliary shields, creating a barrier strong enough to intercept the fragment. The station shuddered as the fragment collided with the shield, disintegrating harmlessly into small particles that harmlessly burned up in the upper atmosphere. The threat was neutralized. The control room erupted in relief. Officers and engineers exchanged surprised glances, impressed by the efficiency of the manual intervention. Seraphine slumped in her chair, breathing heavily, sweat dampening her brow. She realized she had succeeded not because of authority or wealth, but because she had observed carefully, adapted quickly, and applied her intelligence to a problem beyond her usual experience. Elias, returning to his routine below, allowed himself a faint smile. The heiress had learned an invaluable lesson. She had experienced firsthand that true power came from skill, observation, and patience, not from status or privilege. He had guided her subtly, allowed her to discover solutions herself, and ensured the station's safety without drawing attention to his own involvement. After the crisis, Seraphine retreated to a quiet observation deck, staring at the disintegrating debris in the upper atmosphere. Her mind replayed every moment of the intervention, every adjustment, and every decision. She realized that she had been tested, guided, and challenged in ways she had never experienced before. The thrill of success was accompanied by a newfound respect for those she had previously dismissed as ordinary. In the lower tunnels, Elias continued his work. The station hummed with renewed energy, systems balanced, and minor maintenance completed. He did not seek recognition, did not boast, and did not intervene further unless necessary. His satisfaction came from knowing that he had guided a mind capable of greatness, teaching lessons that would remain with her far longer than any reprimand or lecture could. Seraphine's perspective began to shift. She understood that she had underestimated not only the station's complexity, but also the capabilities of the people who maintained it. Ordinary humans, she realized, could possess extraordinary skill, intelligence, and foresight. The arrogance she had carried for years seemed less important in comparison to the quiet competence of someone like Elias. That night, the station's lights dimmed for the sleep cycle. Seraphine remained at the observation deck, reflecting on the day's events. She felt a mixture of exhaustion, pride, and a strange sense of humility. For the first time, she recognized the value of patience, observation, and careful thought. She had faced a challenge she could not control, and in overcoming it, she had grown in ways her wealth could never achieve. Elias, moving quietly through the tunnels, checked the final conduits and panels. He ensured that no damage had occurred and that all systems were functioning optimally. To anyone passing by, he was simply a janitor finishing his nightly rounds. Yet in truth, he had guided a powerful mind, shaped a lesson in humility, and ensured the station's survival. His influence was invisible, but its impact was profound. In the following days, Seraphine's behavior began to change subtly. She approached her work with more care, observed systems more closely, and treated the station's workers with increased respect. She asked questions, listened to advice, and acknowledged the expertise of those she had once dismissed. While her rebellious spirit remained, it was tempered by understanding, intelligence, and a growing appreciation for the value of ordinary humans. Elias continued his quiet mentorship. He did not interfere directly, but allowed her experiences and observations to guide her learning. Each challenge she faced, each problem she solved, reinforced the lessons he had begun teaching. He knew that true understanding could not be handed over. It had to be discovered through effort, observation, and reflection. The station itself seemed to hum in approval. Systems ran smoothly, humans worked effectively, and even the wealthy upper decks adjusted to a new sense of order. Seraphine had been tested, challenged, and ultimately transformed, not by authority, not by punishment, but by subtle guidance and the demonstration of skill, patience, and intelligence. And so, the delicate balance continued. The rebellious heiress had faced a crisis that required her to act with focus, intelligence, and humility. The humble janitor had guided her invisibly, teaching lessons in observation, patience, and respect for the capabilities of ordinary humans. Together, they had navigated a challenge that threatened the station itself, proving that true strength lay not in wealth or status, but in knowledge, skill, and quiet determination. As the stars rotated silently beyond the station's observation windows, Seraphine realized that she had begun to understand something profound. Power was not measured by the size of one's fortune or the influence of one's name. It was measured by the ability to think, observe, and act wisely in the face of uncertainty. She did not yet know the identity of her invisible guide, but she sensed the presence of someone who had taught her more than any teacher, lecture, or manual ever could. Elias, walking through the lower tunnels, paused for a moment to glance at the observation decks above. The young heiress had grown, if only slightly, and the seeds of humility and understanding had been planted. He returned to his work, content to remain unseen, knowing that his silent lessons were having an impact far greater than any recognition could provide. The station hummed on, a marvel of human engineering, skill, and collaboration. Wealth and privilege existed, yes, but they no longer defined the boundaries of what could be achieved. Intelligence, patience, and careful observation had proven their value, and the rebellious heiress had learned, at last, that even the humblest human could wield extraordinary power when armed with knowledge and determination. The station glimmered in the pale light of the distant sun, a web of glass, steel, and circuits stretching across orbit. The recent crisis had passed, leaving only minor repairs and lingering whispers of what had occurred. Yet beneath the calm, a new energy hummed through the corridors. The balance between arrogance and skill had shifted, subtly but unmistakably. The rebellious heiress had changed, though she herself was only beginning to realize it. Seraphine walked along the upper decks, her movements deliberate, her eyes scanning her surroundings with a new awareness. The thrill of wealth and privilege still pulsed within her, but it no longer defined her actions. Her experiences in the tunnels below, the unseen guidance, the subtle lessons, the challenges that had tested her intellect and patience, had left their mark. She noticed details she had once overlooked: a flicker of a light panel, a minor vibration along a maintenance conduit, the quiet efficiency of workers who moved like shadows. Each observation reminded her of what she had learned. Officers and staff watched her carefully. Some were surprised by her change, others remained skeptical. Yet Seraphine paid them little attention. Her focus was inward, reflecting on her own growth, and outward, observing the station itself. She understood now that true control was not about asserting authority over others. It was about understanding the systems around her, anticipating challenges, and respecting the abilities of those who maintained them. Elias, moving quietly through the lower tunnels, observed from his usual vantage points. The janitor had seen the subtle transformations in her behavior over the past days. She had moved from arrogance to curiosity, from recklessness to careful observation, and now toward understanding and respect. Elias did not intervene directly. He knew that the final lessons could only emerge naturally, through her own actions and recognition. The day began with routine inspections, but an unexpected minor anomaly in the station's energy grid caught Seraphine's attention. A series of cascading power fluctuations threatened to disrupt several upper deck systems. She approached the control terminal with the precision of someone who had learned to think critically, tracing energy flows, checking for irregularities, and noting patterns. Her previous impulsiveness was replaced with focus, her pride tempered by recognition of her own limitations. Officers scrambled to contain the issue, but Seraphine stepped forward, calmly analyzing the situation. She traced the source of the fluctuations to a maintenance junction in the lower levels. She could feel the presence of the hidden hand that had guided her before, and though she did not yet know its owner, she felt respect for the mind behind it. The lessons she had learned allowed her to anticipate what needed to be done, to coordinate actions effectively, and to apply her intelligence in practical ways. Descending into the tunnels, she followed the path she had memorized during previous challenges. The narrow corridors stretched ahead, filled with the quiet hum of machinery and the subtle vibrations of energy conduits. She noticed details she had once ignored: minor alignment marks, faint signs of wear, and the precise timing of system cycles. Each observation informed her next action, and she moved with the confidence of someone who understood that true skill required patience, awareness, and respect for the environment. Elias, watching from a distance, allowed her to proceed without interference. This was her moment to demonstrate everything she had learned. He had created a subtle series of indicators, minor anomalies in the system that required careful thought to interpret. They would guide her to the correct solution, but only if she applied the lessons she had absorbed over the past days. As she reached the junction, Seraphine paused, taking in the situation. A series of energy conduits were misaligned, causing cascading fluctuations that threatened the upper decks. She examined each panel carefully, tracing the paths, noting the timings, and predicting the sequence of interactions. Her mind worked quickly, applying the principles of observation, pattern recognition, and careful problem-solving she had developed under Elias' unseen guidance. Step by step, she adjusted the conduits, rerouted minor energy flows, and synchronized system cycles. The fluctuations began to stabilize. Each action required precision and careful thought, and she approached them methodically, aware of the consequences of even minor mistakes. Her hands moved with confidence, guided by intellect rather than instinct or arrogance. Elias observed quietly, noting the elegance of her approach. She had internalized the lessons of patience, observation, and humility, applying them naturally and effectively. Her transformation was complete, not through words or lectures, but through experience and guidance. She had become a problem solver, a thinker, and a leader in her own right, qualities that no wealth or title could bestow. As the energy grid stabilized, officers and technicians realized that the crisis had been averted. They exchanged surprised glances, impressed not only by the solution, but by the calm and deliberate manner in which it had been achieved. Seraphine looked around, her mind alert yet composed. sensing the presence of someone who had guided her indirectly through countless lessons. For a moment, she wondered who it could be. Her eyes swept the tunnels, searching for any sign of interference. There was none. She realized with quiet amazement that she had been mentored by someone invisible, someone who had taught her without confrontation, and whose intelligence and patience had challenged her in ways she could not have imagined. Ilias remained in the shadows, unseen, yet profoundly present. He allowed her to reflect, to recognize the lessons, and to appreciate the skill required to guide her growth. He did not seek acknowledgement or praise. His satisfaction came from knowing that she had learned the true value of intelligence, observation, and humility. In the hours that followed, Seraphine returned to the upper decks, her perspective transformed. She spoke to workers with respect, asked questions with genuine curiosity, and observed the station with a careful eye. Her rebellious spirit remained, but it was tempered by understanding and awareness. She recognized that true power lay not in wealth or status, but in the ability to see clearly, think critically, and act wisely. News of her transformation spread quietly among the officers and staff. They noted the change in her behavior, her attentiveness, and her willingness to learn from those she had once dismissed. The station's hierarchy remained, but the balance of respect had shifted. Ordinary humans, once overlooked, now commanded recognition through skill, intelligence, and quiet competence. Later that evening, Seraphine returned to the observation deck, watching the planet below and the stars beyond. She reflected on the past days, the lessons, the challenges, and the unseen guidance that had shaped her growth. She realized that she had been fortunate to encounter someone who could teach without condescension, who could challenge without harm, and who had shown her the power of patience, observation, and humility. Ilias continued his rounds in the lower tunnels, checking systems, adjusting minor conduits, and maintaining the station's operations. To anyone else, he remained invisible, just a janitor completing his duties. But in truth, he had quietly transformed a mind, guided a spirit, and ensured the survival and improvement of the station itself. His work, silent and unseen, had created ripples far greater than any recognition could measure. Seraphine now understood the lesson fully. She approached her responsibilities with care, observed her environment with attentiveness, and respected the intelligence of those around her. Her arrogance had been replaced with curiosity, her impulsiveness tempered by thoughtfulness, and her pride balanced by humility. She had learned that the strength of ordinary humans, skillful, observant, patient, could surpass wealth, privilege, and entitlement. In the days that followed, she sought to apply what she had learned. She collaborated with technicians, engaged with officers, and observed the station's systems with careful attention. Each success reinforced the lessons she had internalized, and each interaction reminded her of the value of intelligence, patience, and respect for others. Ilias continued to mentor in subtle ways, creating small challenges, minor anomalies, and opportunities for problem-solving. He never revealed himself directly, allowing Seraphine to develop confidence and insight on her own. Through his guidance, she became a true leader, capable of managing the station with wisdom, observation, and humility. The station itself thrived. Systems ran smoothly, crises were managed efficiently, and the balance between upper and lower decks shifted subtly. Respect for ordinary humans grew, not because of wealth or status, but because of skill, intelligence, and quiet competence. Seraphine's transformation served as an example, inspiring others to recognize the value of knowledge and humility over arrogance and privilege. One evening, as the stars twinkled beyond the observation windows, Seraphine stood alone, reflecting on everything she had learned. She felt gratitude, admiration, and a sense of awe for the invisible guide who had challenged her so profoundly. She did not need to know his name or see his face. She understood the lessons, and that was enough. Ilias, completing his nightly rounds, paused briefly to glance at the upper decks. The young heiress had grown, matured, and transformed into someone capable of leadership, wisdom, and respect. He returned to his work, content to remain unseen, knowing that the true reward was not recognition, but the knowledge that he had guided a mind and spirit toward growth, humility, and understanding. The station spun silently in orbit, a testament to human ingenuity, collaboration, and resilience. Wealth and privilege existed, but they no longer defined the measure of capability. Skill, observation, patience, and quiet competence had proven their power. And through it all, an ordinary janitor had quietly shaped the course of a mind, proving that even those underestimated could wield extraordinary influence. Seraphine, now thoughtful and grounded, understood the true nature of power. She had learned that arrogance and rebellion could be tempered by wisdom, that intelligence could guide action, and that respect for the abilities of others was the foundation of true leadership. She smiled faintly, knowing that she had grown beyond what she had been, and that the lessons she had learned would stay with her for a lifetime. Elias, unseen and unassuming, continued his work, the heartbeat of the station steady beneath his hands. He had taught without words, guided without confrontation, and shaped a spirit through subtle wisdom. The story of the rebellious heiress and the humble janitor had reached its conclusion, leaving behind a transformed station, a wiser young woman, and a quiet reminder that true power resides not in wealth or status, but in knowledge, patience, and the skill to guide others with care and understanding.